The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show with me, Charles Christian. Thank you for tuning in again. We've another big interview in this show, but before we start with that, here's a thought for the day. It is now almost 20 years ago to the day that the notorious gonzo journalist and a personal hero of mine, Hunter S. Thompson, wrote the following words in one of his newspaper columns. "We are living in dangerously weird times now. Smart people just shrug and admit they're dazed and confused. The only ones left with any confidence at all are the new dumb. It is the beginning of the end of our world as we knew it. Doom is the operative ethic." And he wrote that 20 years ago? What would he make of the year 2020? Now for our interview, which this week is with American author and journalist Marie D. Jones. I really enjoyed this interview and I hope you do too, because along with discussing the books Marie writes, fiction and non-fiction, including Disaster Preparedness, The Paranormal, Ancient Knowledge, Unknown Mysteries, UFOs and Alien Technology, Surveillance Technology and Conspiracy Theories, her interview also shines a light on the reality of being a writer today. Marie D. Jones is the author of over 20 non-fiction books, including Pure Science, How Quantum Physics and New Science May Explain the Existence of Paranormal Phenomena, Mind Wars, The Power of Archetypes. She co-wrote Supervolcano, a catastrophic event that changed the course of human history, with her father, the geophysicist Dr. John Savino. Some of her current titles include The Disaster Survival Guide, Celebrity Ghosts and Notorious Hauntings, and Earth Magic, and The New Witch. She's also a novelist of both young adult and horror fiction, with her new novel 13 being released next year. She's also written for numerous magazines, has appeared on the History Channel's Nostradamus Effect and Ancient Aliens television series, and been interviewed on many radio shows, including Coast to Coast and Midnight in the Desert, and of course now the Weird Tales Radio Show. Marie is also a fully trained CERT, that's Community Emergency Response Team, disaster responder, trained through FEMA, the Department of Homeland Security and the Red Cross. Good to speak to you after those technology issues. Let's talk about your writing career, but let's kick off with your latest book, and one you've got is the non-fiction ones you've got coming up in the new year. You've got The New Witch, which is out this month, I believe.
Today is release day.
Right, so this is The New Witch, your guide to modern witchcraft, Wicca, spells, potions, magic, and more. And you've got an iPhone on the cover of it with lots of little icons to fit in with the normal grimoire. So
fitting.
Yes, tell us what's in the book and how you came to write it.
So what's interesting about this is I've been working with this publisher, Visible Ink Press, on the last several books. I'm actually on my 26th nonfiction book. So
it's going.
Yes, it's been great. And I've worked with a couple of other publishers, and so oftentimes as the writers, we will say, hey, I'd love to write a book about this or that. And other times the publishers will say, listen, we would love it if, you would write about this. So the last book that I had called Earth Magic, which came out a few months ago, was about this feel and this need that we're all kind of feeling and seeing of a necessity to return to nature a little bit. And especially lately, everybody's been so cooped up. But also, I think a feeling that establishment, politics, religion, the traditional structures might not be satisfying us in many ways and failing us in many others. And this is subject matter that I had been involved with for a long, long time. And so I really jumped at the chance to do these two books. I kind of think of them as sister books.
Yes.
Earth Magic is a little bit more about finding that magic and awe and wonder and looking to the earth for our needs. And that can be everything from healing to peace and also witchcraft, Wicca, earth traditions. With New Witch, though, what I really wanted to explore was how these ancient traditions have changed because of technology. Everybody's on social media and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and everybody's on the internet, and people are doing YouTube videos. And how has that changed? Has it made these things more accessible? And so that was really exciting to look at. And that's what I consider the New Witch, is somebody who has embraced the traditions of old with the technology of today.
Give us an example of how that works. I mean, we've seen various stories about it, and I know we ran a story about a group of witches, I think they were in Romania, who were sending people spells and reading fortunes and doing all manner of things, but basically using iPhones. So what sort of examples have you got? How are you doing it?
So before I even get into that, you bring up a really good point. There's going to be a lot of benefits to embracing technology and the new ways that we're communicating with each other and with other people and with people that are not familiar with these subjects. But there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you have to be discerning. But what I found was I like Instagram. I love the visuals. I'm a writer, Facebook, Twitter, it's words. Yeah. I already have enough of that in my life. But what I was finding is that I would follow I found these really cool witches and Wiccans and any pagans that were making these really cool candles and soaps. And here's what I'm making elderberry syrup for my kids when they have a cold. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is really just sort of a burgeoning communication, way for people to learn about alternative spirituality, alternative healing, using the gifts of nature, and to do it visually. And so then Facebook, of course, has a million groups that you can join. And Twitter, I think Twitter is hard for me because it's just too brief. You don't get a whole lot of info. So then I noticed that there were a lot of vlogs, which are video blogs, where I could go on YouTube and I could learn how to write a proper spell, which is very similar to learning about working with the law of attraction and things like that. And I realized this is really, really cool. It's demystifying a lot of what it means to be a witch, a Wiccan, a shaman. Native Americans have their own traditions. It demystifies it, but it also allows for new ideas and new ways of sharing. Hey, look what I'm doing. I'm growing these herbs, and I've learned that this particular herb is good for this ailment, or I use this for my love spells. It's just such a great sharing of information that I was just having such a good time, and it was really fun writing the book that hopefully reflects that.
Yeah. Where would you've talked about Instagram? If you were advising somebody who wanted to know about modern witchcraft, You'd reckon looking on Instagram would that be it, or to YouTube? Where would you first go? I mean, YouTube, you can find how to do videos
yes.
of everything. And I mean, I think we all now go there, whatever it is. There's,
Yeah. So again, you have some discernment, because there are a lot of people that take this very seriously. There are a lot of different types of witchcraft and Wicca that are being practiced. So you may not take to one tradition if they're very structured. You might like this one, it's a little more feminist. You might like this one over here because they really get into moon rituals. It's a kind of a personal thing. But my advice would be always look for, and you can go onto Instagram and you could do a search for witchcraft, Wicca. You're going to pull up a lot of different people. Look for those that have the biggest followings. And I hate to say that, because sometimes there's really good quality accounts that are just coming on and they're new. But I feel like you want to make sure things are a little bit vetted. So then go look at the page, scroll down, look at what they're posting, look what is their attitude. Witches and Wiccans all believe that what you put out comes back to you. So if they're spewing hatred and political, diatribe and violence, they're not witches.
Yeah. Yes.
They're not Wiccans. Go away, avoid them. If you are really into one particular style of practice, some people love to work with candles. You'll start to notice which accounts really get into candle magic. And so it's going to take some research, and then follow them and build up a little list of, groups on Facebook that you've vetted, you've gone and you've looked. A lot of them are public. Some are private, but, you don't want to get into a private group if you don't know what they're all about.
Yes.
But look and see, what are their posts? Go back, scroll back a little, take a look at what they've been doing. And then you can decide who you want to follow. And it's just really amazing the variety that is out there. Now, when I was writing the book, I wanted to make sure that I was giving the best information I could find. And I did notice a lot of accounts that I felt were a little sketchy.
Yes.
But I think it's something that you've got to do on your own. Do a little bit of research and just use discernment.
Yes. And I mean, a valid point is that the face-to-face groups that used to exist, a lot of those are on hold depending upon what kind of lockdown your country is at the time.
Yes.
I think more and more people are going to becoming, if you like, sole practitioners, having to be eclectic, to do their own thing rather than... Right.
The solitaries are really... But here's another interesting thing. There's covens online, and people are doing Zoom. And they don't necessarily call themselves covens. There could just be groups of people that get together to talk about, hey, I'm going to be making this week, or I'm going to be working with these herbs, and they'll do a Zoom. And so there is the visual aspect that you can get and the socialization. And then when things lift, you can decide if this is for you, whether you want to find a group or a coven in your area, or if you want to continue. I'm a lone wolf, for me, solitary, everything. And I think that goes towards being a writer too.
It does.
But other people really love, like one of my writing partner belongs to a coven in Arizona, and they're all women of a certain age, you could say, and she loves it, and so it's really a individualized personal thing. And I would say that anything you want or like is out there, and you can find a perfect fit with just a little bit of footwork.
As you say, that book very much follows on from Earth Magic, and The New Witch is out now. But you've got, just looking on your website and on your news, you've got a new book coming out next year called Propaganda, Disinformation and You.
Oh, yeah. Complete switch up, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed you've got a book earlier on, Mind Wars, which I'm wondering
Yes.
whether is on a similar
It is. It is.
line. Now, how do those two fit in together? The two.
So they're different. They're different publishers, but I had always. So as a writer, I'm interested in a million things, and I was asked by my other publisher, which was New Page Books. This was several years ago when I was working with another writing partner to do a book on the history of mind control, domestic surveillance, social engineering. And that book, I just to this day get emails and messages all the time from people that say, hey, I stumbled across Mind Wars, mind blown. They just found it so mind blowing. Well, in light of everything that I have been watching going on in the last several years with the rise of domestic propaganda in the United States and globally, and
globally,
how the media globally, absolutely, and how mainstream media has gone from, I'm a journalism student from way back. Journalism is basically dead.
Yeah.
And so, it's heartbreaking to me watching the vast amounts of censorship I've been censored that I'm seeing, and how propaganda and fake news has become so prevalent. So with Visible Ink Press, they wanted to do a book on propaganda. I wanted to do a book on propaganda, follow up with all of the things that I had written about in Mind Wars and all of the new things that I had learned. So there's a little bit of crossover, but I think, somebody could read Mind Wars. They're going to get the absolute comprehensive history of mind control and surveillance. And then in the propaganda book, I think they're going to have their minds blown by how much they are being manipulated. And I'm not just talking politics, I'm talking advertising, pharmaceutical industry, food industry, anything that somebody's trying to sell you, whether it's or get from you, whether it's your vote or sell you a car. There's so much manipulation. And because we live such busy, crazy, chaotic lives, we don't fight back enough. I think we are so exhausted and burnt out and distracted that we are allowing this to become the new normal,
Yes.
to borrow a favorite term that's going around now. And it was a very painful book to write, but also one, and I was really kind of upset when I found out it wasn't coming out till next May, because it needs to be out now. It needs to be out now. But, book production takes a while.
It does
and
indeed,
so yes, it does. So, but I think it'll be as timely any time. But it was one of the things I love about writing is I get to research and I get to dive down rabbit holes, and my eyes had already been open, but they were opened even wider. And I tell people, once you identify what propaganda looks like and how you're being manipulated, you will never not see it again. You cannot unsee it.
Yes.
So off my little soapbox there.
No, we're all on that soapbox. I mean, over here in the UK, it's been noticeable with the response to the pandemic and how it's been presented. And you just think, well, that's not right. You're talking nonsense here. And you see it a lot with newspaper reports of whether this drug or not that drug it might help fight COVID. And then you scratch the surface and the source isn't a valid medical source. There's no research behind it. It's just a press release that other people have then repeated. And then because it's been repeated enough times, well, it must be true because we've read it everywhere.
And with medical research, I mean, I always tell people, if you're just reading what CNN is saying, hey, here's this research study. No, you need to follow it to the source, and you need to follow it to the money. Who is funding that study?
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, if it's got to do with a vaccine or a pill or a drug, it's the pharmaceutical industry.
Exactly.
And people don't have time to do that. I understand. It's my job. They don't have time, but it really frustrates me because the general public's lack of time and effort to dig into things is what I think is derailing public, information, good, solid,
Yes.
truthful journalism and information from getting to the public. So it's kind of like we're digging our own graves in a way.
No, no, definitely. That is so noticeable. Where did the research come from that said vitamin D3 wasn't any use? Oh, it was a pharmaceutical company that's
Right,
investing millions in a drug that will be selling at several $100s.
There you go.
Yeah, as opposed to, it's very cheap and you can buy it anywhere. Yeah,
and I found it really great because the book that I'm currently writing is on toxins in our food, water, air, medications, everything.
Yeah.
It's about toxins. And so I'm having to do a lot of scientific research. And I found that there's a couple of really great sites. One of them is PubMed, where they actually, if you scroll down to the bottom, everything is sourced, but they also have, so-and-so from this study worked for, it's like they're very open and transparent. Yeah. And we need more of that, but there just isn't enough. And again, if somebody's reading the headlines on, their Yahoo homepage when they turn their computer on, they're getting spin. They're getting doctored, sponsored information. Yeah. And they don't want to admit it because, then they'd have to admit that they themselves are responsible for the proliferation of propaganda and fake news.
Yeah.
And we all are. We've all done it. We're all guilty of it.
Well, I think we've slipped into this mode, and all the time nothing too disastrous was happening. It didn't really matter. But now we've got, I'm not going to comment on politics in the United States because ours is a car crash over here in the UK. But now we've got, less than balanced governments running a lot of places, and we've got a pandemic. Suddenly it becomes important. And
it does. Yeah. When things are made personal, and there are a lot of people here arguing on Facebook every day over who's right and who's wrong. Yeah. And the thing is until something becomes personal, and it becomes a part of your personal experience, you're not going to wake up to it. Yeah. You're going to continue to be a member of cult A or cult B.
Yep.
And meanwhile, the powers that be are just running roughshod over all of us because they know that we're busy fighting and arguing with each other. So it's very frustrating for me to do these books sometimes and feel like, I just want to scream, do your research. So I have to take breaks and write books like New Witch and Earth Magic and write fiction and things just so I don't have a heart attack.
Yes. I am one of the world's slowest writers when it comes to books. I'm always in awe of somebody who produces books like you. But, you're not just doing the non-fiction. You're also doing the fiction as well. And you're working on some more projects, I believe, on
films.
Films as well. But, on the fiction, you've got the Echo books, but you're also working on some other ones, I think, for younger audiences.
I do. I actually have that series was written with my son, and it's actually based on a spy group that he formed when he was being bullied. He has a disability. When he was in grade school, he formed a spy group so that all the bullied kids could spy on the bullies to stay one step ahead of them. And so I took that basic idea and we turned it into a sort of a sci-fi. I have an adult horror novel coming out next year. And then after that, I have another sort of a supernatural horror novel coming out with Vesuvian Books. Mm-hmm. And a couple of other novels of my own that I'm getting out there. And my first love was fiction. And I never had intended to write nonfiction. Excuse me. It just sort of happened.
Yeah.
And I wrote a book probably about 14, maybe even longer, years ago called Looking for God in All the Wrong Places. And it was just a sort of a fun spiritual commentary about how we always look outside ourselves for everything, for happiness. and it sold maybe 10 copies. But it got me my book agent, Lisa Hagen, who then, my next book that she got me a deal for was with New Page, and it's still my favorite book I've ever written. Is Science, and it's spelled P-S-I-E-N-C-E.
Right.
And yes. It's on, looking at science and the paranormal. And my father was a geophysicist, and he was really into UFOs and ufology. So he kind of helped me vet that book, and then it just took off. I'm a trained disaster responder through the Red Cross and through FEMA, and I wanted to write a disaster survival guide.
I see that. I was looking at your bio, and I spotted that because I wondered when I first saw your books, how did the survival guide get in there on your page? It's right next to Demons and the Devil and Fallen Angels.
Isn't that weird? I know. People are like, what the heck is wrong with you? That one, I am so glad I got to do. And I have over 20 years of training in everything from disaster preparedness to response to triage, medical aid, urban search and rescue, rural search and rescue, disaster assessment, you name it.
Yeah.
And I'd always wanted to write a really comprehensive book that people could just throw in their emergency bag or in their pantry and have. But I also, realized that people don't always know, myself included, what to do. Like if you get stung by a bee, do you really scrape it with a credit card? Or when you get burned, there's different kinds of burns. How do you treat burns and different cuts? And so there's everything in here from like the smallest little cut to an asteroid impact. It's like I might as well go to and I really wanted to kind of show people how so much of this is common sense.
Yeah.
And there's things that you do before, there's things that you do during, and there's things that you do after. And all you need to do is be aware of what the disasters are in your region. Like I live in Southern California. We just had over 400 earthquakes out towards near the San Andreas Fault. There was a huge earthquake swarm. And they were all, 4.9 was the biggest.
Yeah.
And we also have wildfires everywhere. So I'm not going to worry so much about hurricanes or blizzards, but I'm going to need to know what to do in those. Now, depending on where you live in the world, there's going to be those local and regional threats. There's going to be things at home. And then there are the global things like the pandemics. And just having a basic, even if you can't possibly remember it all, but being able to have a basic understanding and have a book that you can run to and open, okay, here it is, right here says that we should do this. For me, with all my training, I still might panic at first and not know what to do. And then, my brain will kick in. So that's really why that book was so important to me.
One thing I notice is a number of your books are co-written with, main one seems to be Larry Flaxman.
Larry Flaxman.
How does co-writing a book work? What are the practicalities of it? Do you both sit down or set each other sections to do, or each edit each other's work, or how does the practicalities of it?
So we haven't written a book in quite a while. We actually, our lives sort of took different turns, and we decided, but it was really fun writing with him. And we did, I think, 10 or 11 books.
Yeah.
And now I write a lot of screenplays with a writing partner. So it's different because I've had a lot of different writing partners over the years. Now, Larry lived in Little Rock, Arkansas. So that was like, several states away from where I was.
Yeah.
Well, now we have, the internet, we have email, we have video, Zoom, and all that kind of stuff. At the time we had, I think we were doing it on Google, and you have, or Skype, and you have the ability to write with somebody on the other side of the world where you didn't have that before. So you could either, hey, you take chapters 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, and I'll do, the even ones. Or in our case, I would usually write the chapter, like do the sort of skeleton, and I would send it to him and he would add and flesh it out and edit it. We'd go back and forth until we felt like, okay, this one's done, on to the next. So it really depends on the person and how much time they have and how well you get along, but also the seamlessness of the writing has to be there.
Yeah.
We didn't want people to be able to go, oh, wow, the style just completely changed. My dad and I wrote a book on supervolcanoes, and he had wanted to do that for years. That's one of his specialties. And it was really hard because, he was a scientist, and he wrote a lot of scientific research papers, and they sounded like them.
Yeah.
And I said, no, Dad, we have to make this sound like, the average lay person can understand. So that was kind of interesting. He would feed me the research and I would reword it, work with it in a way that it could be readily understood. And then there were some chapters that I took over that were a little more theoretical. That was fun too. So it really depends on the two people and what the project is.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
And then talking on your project, and you've just alluded to it, you're also working as a screenwriter.
Yes, that was, when I was little, I wanted to be a jockey. Now that, that ship sailed pretty quickly. And I always knew I was going to be a writer, and I figured I could write about horse racing. So I wanted to write novels. That was my first, when I was a teenager, I was really into Stephen King and, I want to write novels. And then as I got into my 20s, I moved to LA and I wanted to write screenplays.
Mm-hmm.
So I started writing them and I realized how much fun the format is. It's simpler than a novel. You don't have to get into the depths of the character's mind. And I did a lot of pitching. I had a couple of agents and it was really just, I don't know, it was a very negative experience. So I kind of set it aside until about maybe 6-7 years ago. I decided I really want to revisit that. And I had signed with a manager who is now doing books to film, and I have another agent. I have a film agent. And so it's really been kind of kicking into high gear that we're pitching. I have a couple of properties that have been optioned, but I also decided I wanted to get into filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the last 2 years, I wrote and co-produced 2 short films.
One of which is Kings Boulevard, is it?
Kings Boulevard.
Yep.
It's won a lot of awards. And the other one is called Graduation Afternoon, and it is what is called a dollar baby, a Stephen King dollar baby. Now, every year, Stephen King puts up a number of his short stories that have not been made into films, and he allows independent filmmakers to option them for $1 and make short films. So I was like, I want to do this. And I had a friend here in San Diego, and he got me a crew and a director. We made a fabulous film that we're hoping, it's because of the COVID, we were not able to get it into festivals in person. So we're going to do that for about 6 months, and then we'll be able to post the film publicly for viewing. Excuse me. And then we were all set earlier this year, and towards the end of last year, earlier this year, to do a feature film. And then, of course, COVID changed everything. So once things change and things open up a little for filming, then I will be making my first feature film, and it'll be a science fiction. So I love it. I will write anything. I'll write on the side of a milk carton. I just love writing. I do a lot of freelance writing. And I'm just sort of a workaholic, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But
I think if you're a writer, it's a good thing, because if you just write the occasional haiku once every 3 months. So you're not gonna get very far. You're gonna starve quickly.
Yeah, and that's just like, for me, that's how I express myself. So
When you started out, you said after you got over becoming a jockey.
I still haven't gotten over that. I just realized it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, I see you own shares in race horses.
I do. Yes, vicariously living.
How did your career start as a writer? Because there's not many people who come straight out of school and say, right, I'm going to be a writer. They very often go somewhere else first and then realize the horror of it and then go off to become a writer. And
then they become a writer and realize the horror of it.
The escape from the 9 till 5 to become a writer, where you can then work 12 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day.
For one third of the pay.
Yeah, and no weekends. So how did you get going as a writer then?
I am one of the freaks that I have been writing short stories and things since I was a kid. I wrote a book on life on Mars when I was 5, and my mom bound the book in cardboard and yarn, and I just always have been writing. And then as a teenager, I started selling my writing. I wrote short stories, and this is going to sound really weird, but at the time, I was writing horror short stories, and I was selling them to men's magazines because they were the only ones that were publishing horror. This was decades ago.
Yeah.
And then I started writing movie reviews and book reviews for local publications, and then a publication in LA that started sending me to movie premieres to cover them. And I started doing features for them.
They said, "What? You're only 5. How did we?"
I know. No, by then I was like 17. But what was interesting, so I was doing that all through my teen years, and I went to college. And in college, I thought, well, I probably should take creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was that the teachers, if you wanted to be a writer, they were all into these eclectic literary journals, and that if you were a commercial writer, and I wanted to write to make money, that you were a hack. And this is something I don't think I've told ever before, but in one of my classes, I was shamed in front of the entire class because I had excitedly announced that I had sold a piece of writing for like $500. And the teacher was selling, for $10 in these literary journals that nobody reads. And he literally shamed me.
Yeah.
And I got up and I said, good luck on your writing career, walked out and never went back. After 2 years of college, I dropped out. And I kind of almost did because I wanted to get into the film department, but there was a 2-year waiting list. And I said, forget it. And from then on, I just wrote and I worked. I worked 2-3 full-time jobs, and I always was a working girl, but I was always writing, and I would stay up late or I'd get up earlier. I wouldn't sleep. And it got to the point eventually where I was able to write part-time and maybe work part-time, and now I'm a full-time writer. That may not necessarily be the normal trajectory for most people, but I just put blinders on. I was very lucky to have a high school journalism teacher who I just did a Zoom with last week after not seeing her for about 18 years, who, she had said to me, because I was editor-in-chief of the high school newspaper, and she said, you could definitely have a professional writing career. I believe in you. And I will tell you that more than anything was all I needed. It was like a rocket taking off. Yes. And there's always that one person
who has faith in you at an early age. Yes.
Oh, my parents were always totally supportive, but your parents have to be. They're your parents.
Yes.
So yeah, it's my journey has been a long, hard one. I am a very hard worker. I have an incredible work ethic. Not everybody is willing to do that. I have a lot of writers that are just starting out that come to me, how do I do this? Will you write my book for me? You know, how do I write? I'm blocked. I'm like, oh, for God's sakes, blocked? I'm the opposite. I have too many things to write about and not enough time. And it's excuses. And I made a lot of those early on, but I got over it really quick.
What got you then into the area, and I was going to say the area you're writing, but you cover such a wide area anyway, certainly into the paranormal area? What was the attraction for that of all the things? You know, why didn't you write westerns or war novels or something? You know, there's
I might still do a western.
Oh, right.
No, it's funny because it's almost the same story. I have been into ghosts and aliens and Bigfoot since I was like a toddler, and I don't know what exposure I would have had except.
You said your father
television.
Was interested in UFOs.
My father was. I have vivid memories of being about 5 or 6 years old. And so my father at the time was, I believe he was at Columbia University. And he had a lot of colleagues. They worked at I'd like to remember the name of the lab, but I can't remember. It was in upstate New York. So his colleagues would come over and they would have beer and smoke cigarettes and sit around the kitchen table in our little home in New York. And these were oceanographers, seismologists, geophysicists, physicists, astrophysicists, and they would talk about UFOs. And I always thought that was really, really cool. And whenever anybody in my neighborhood growing up saw something in the sky, they would go get your dad, go get your dad. And there was a really funny story where my dad was in the bathroom and the whole neighborhood was outside and looking up at this bright light in the sky. And they made me run up the street and get my dad out of the bathroom. He comes down the hill, looks up and says, "It's Venus," walks back up the hill, goes back in the house and back in the bathroom. And literally shattered the illusions of everyone in the neighborhood. But yeah, I'd go to the library because this was before the internet and get every book I could find. I was telling ghost stories. There's another really stupid thing I did when I was little during the first moonwalk, because I'm in my 50s now. So during the first moonwalk, there is reel-to-reel tape recording of the moonwalk. We were taping it, but you could hear me in the foreground telling a ghost story and ruining the whole tape. Not realizing this is historical and might be worth something later, but now. So I was always really into science. I was a science nerd, a tomboy growing up, but I always loved the paranormal, and I never thought that there was a real gap between the two, except when it came to our understanding of it.
Yes.
So I was really lucky. And my next book, because I've been writing some really intense books, the propaganda book, I have a book on toxins, then I'm doing a natural health manual. But I asked my publisher, I said, please, please, please let me write another UFO book. So I'm going to be doing a big collection of celebrity and famous people UFO sightings next year, and I'm really excited about that because that was and still is my biggest fascination, was always ufology and UFOs, and is there other life out there, and are they here, and have they been here? Are they part of our government? That would make a lot of sense,
One other thing I've seen on your site are your attitudinals. They've got some wonderful titles there. Oh, off. What the did I? No, WTF, sorry. Did I just dream about? And where's this one? My amazing, brilliant OMG. It's totally gonna make $1 million from this frickin' awesome idea journal for writers, inventors, and other creative folks. What are they? Because I'm clicking on them and it doesn't actually open up, and I can't actually grasp what's in
right.
there.
You have to go to Amazon. And so being a writer, things get intense and you want to take a break. So for some strange reason, I decided to start doing fun journals because I I collect a lot of just lined, or blank notebooks and journals. As a writer, you're always wanting to jot things down.
Yes.
And I noticed a lot of them, I would buy them for my gal friends and, for birthdays or Christmas stocking stuffers. And I thought, oh my gosh, these would be so fun to make some really snarky ones that kind of show some attitude. So I just started doing it, and it was so fun. And I think now I have 20. And I've stopped because I do need to get back to the serious work.
Yes.
But they're so fun, and they're easy to do. And they're just, they're for people that love journals. It's a huge market. And the simpler they are inside, the better. But I find that, I just love the idea of a really fun cover where somebody could give it as a gift. And, it's just such a fun novelty gift, but it's also useful. So that was the idea behind that. I just, it's like, I need a break from writing. Okay, let me go do some writing. But it's a little less because the inside's mostly blank.
No, that seems a wonderful way of getting through writing the books. Yes, I'm just looking at bored out of my frickin' skull idea, and it's basically a sleeping cat.
Yeah. So there's a food journal. I think there's an exercise. I forgot some of the earlier ones I did. There's a one for kids to write their gratitudes in, and I use all mine. I have a copy of all of them, and I use them. And the insides might have a little cartoon or graphic, or some of them are lined, some are blank for just if you want to doodle, like if you're on a long Zoom for work, you want to doodle. There's something for everyone. Yeah. And, most people come up with great ideas. They write them down. And then we have such short memories that you're never going to remember it.
No, somebody told me that a long time ago, that the difference between writers and non-writers is that writers never go anywhere without a notebook. And they usually have one by the side of the bed. So when they wake up in the middle of the night, they can jot down any ideas they've got.
My drawer is filled with them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whereas non-writers forget the idea and they never quite capture it. Yes.
Oh, somebody once said to me, oh, don't you know you could write a little note on your phone with your little note app? And I was like, are you kidding me?
That's not the same, no.
You are not a writer. Don't speak to me about such things.
No, it's true. It's true. It just doesn't feel the same doing it that way.
No, it doesn't. I think there's a disconnect, for your brain. I think your brain likes to pick up the pen or pencil and feel the movement. And
yeah, just one sort of final question on your writing. Are you a draft out first on paper? What's your writing method?
For most of my life, I had to write everything on a lined yellow pad.
Right.
And then I would type it up. First we had typewriters long before the days of computer.
Yes.
Do you remember when you made a mistake? You just sort of had to white it out somehow. I mean, how did we survive? But we did. So I really held out on getting the computer. But once I did, I still felt like I can't write on a computer. I can edit, but I can't write. So then it took another 10 years. But now, for nonfiction, yes, everything has to be planned out, outline, table of contents. I have folders, old school folders that I keep research in, and I love to print things out. And I recycle by flipping the paper over and using it again for the next book. And I have tons of things that I bookmarked and saved, and I have books and blah, blah, blah. So that's very planned out. And then once I feel like I've absorbed enough, then I follow my outline and I just get it down. But with nonfiction, what's interesting is you're always coming across new information, and then you have to plug it in. Now with fiction, I hear, oh, Marie, are you a planner or are you a pantser by the seat of your pants? Honestly, it really depends. I have had, the Echo novel, and I have another one that I had written, not Echo, I'm sorry. I had written a couple of novels as part of what's called NaNoWriMo. It's National Novel Writing Month.
Yes.
And it's coming up in November. Yeah.
Yeah.
No planning. I sat down, whatever came out, came out. And then later I realized I've got something here, but it's a mess. And I went back and edited and got it into where it could be publishable. With Echo, with things like that, I have to play the story out in my head for a long time before I sit down to write it.
Mm-hmm.
I do jot down notes. Or like with screenplays, Denise and I, we do just a really basic outline so we know where we're going.
Yeah.
And then we begin, because the most fun part about writing fiction is the organic stuff that comes up that you're not expecting. And people don't believe me, but when you're writing fiction, your characters will start to do things that you did not plan for.
Yes.
Or the story will suddenly go off in another direction and you're like, whoa. And I love that. That is the coolest feeling in the world. But you still kind of have to know A, B, C, D, and where you'd like to end up. I think otherwise you probably do twice as much work.
Yes.
And I'm not into extra effort.
Yeah. No, I've heard other writers, and I say from my own writing, I know that your characters evolve and literally take on a life of their own and go that way.
Yeah. I don't know how anybody could sit down and write, a 500-page novel without having any kind of knowledge or outline of where they're going. That's hard.
Yes.
But I know there are writers that will write a very detailed outline and they refuse to budge from it, even though the story is begging to go elsewhere. So there's a real happy medium in there, the sweet spot.
Of the writing you do, what is your favorite, or are you happy with all of them? Is it fiction, non-fiction? Is it paranormal? Is it more science-based?
Oh my gosh. I love it all. I mean, I think science for me is still my favorite nonfiction book, because I at the time was so naive to think that I could write a book on that subject matter, not being a scientist or having any, letters after my name.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it because I was so fascinated. And what I realized is that's the power of writing, is that you can become fascinated by something and then you could go share it with everybody else. I loved that. So that's what I like about nonfiction. However, I am finding that I'm going to need to be winding down, because after a couple of dozen books, and I've talked to other writers that have done a lot of nonfiction, you really start to have less of an ability for your brain to retain information. and I'm exhausted. And I've told people that, and they're like, well, all you do is sit and write. So you don't understand. I love the fiction the best. I love screenwriting, but I think the most fun is novels, because I love to immerse myself in a world that only exists in that novel, whether I'm reading it or writing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes an alternate reality. It is so cool. And the best writing will do that. You open a novel and it'll suck you in, and you're in another world, another place, and you know these characters. And even when you're writing it, that happens. It happens to the point to where when I finish at the end of the day at 5:00, it's very disorienting. It's like, oh, real life. Oh, people still arguing on Facebook about politics. Oh, my Lord, Can I go back into my little world?
What is your typical writing routine? Because again, that's one of those things. Are you the early bird sort who gets up at writing from dawn, or are you late, a night owl type?
I used to write all the time. I used to write late into the night. Now I'm kind of I have a lot of insomnia, which I think a lot of writers suffer from. So usually I'll be up. I'm usually up by 6. I usually am at my computer by 8. I write through till 5. And then I used to write after that, and I realized I was getting really burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And a good friend of mine, who's also an incredibly prolific nonfiction writer, Nick Redfern.
Yes, we've
Nick.
Yes, we've interviewed him. Yes, he's very prolific.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's my idol with the awesomeness of the productivity. But I remember Nick saying that he stopped working on weekends and evenings, and that he's even more prolific because he's giving himself the chance to live and take a break. And from him, I adopted that. So evenings, I will sometimes be on phone calls. I might be doing some editing, but I don't write in the evenings. And on weekends, I do write on and off, but I also, that's my living.
Yeah.
And I used to write every day except Christmas. And now I'm taking more days where it's like, you know what? I'm way ahead of my deadlines. I can chill a little today and maybe, go somewhere with my son or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I feel weird when I'm not writing, but I'm learning that I have to have time to fill the well back, or there's not going to be anything to, bring out of the well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Nick was responsible for me deciding to take some breaks.
Well, that's a perfect place to end the interview on the writer who discovered that there are things called weekends.
Wait, what? There's an outside life?
Yes, I know.
Yes.
It's a bit scary because
it is. Yeah.
You can't rewrite it or edit it out. I don't
know,
like that
reality
bit.
is
I'm
awful.
deleting that character. That's wonderful. Well, Marie, it's been a delight speaking to you. And as I say, good luck with your work.
It has been a pleasure. I'm so glad we connected.
Indeed. Thank you ever so much. Once again, a big thank you to Marie D. Jones, and you can find links to all of her books on her website at www.mariedjones.com. And remember that D between Marie and Jones. And that's it. Time to go. For those of you listening in before Halloween, happy Halloween. Or Samhain if you're of the witchy persuasion. For those of you who are listening in after Halloween, sorry, but you missed it. However, there'll be another one along same time next year. Just remember, when witches go riding and black cats are seen, the moon laughs and whispers, 'tis the season of Halloween. This is Charles Christian saying thank you for listening. Please join me again next week. Until then, stay well, stay weird, and now it's time to say goodbye.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter at Christian Uncut. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.